has a royal underlying backstory. Sophia Charlotte, born May 19, 1744, and lived to be 74, was the queen consort of the British King George III from their marriage on September 8th in 1761 until her death in 1818. As George's wife, she was also Electress and later Queen of Hanover and Queen of America when the United States was ruled by England. On her wedding day, Charlotte spoke no English. However, she quickly learned English, albeit speaking with a strong German accent. Queen Charlotte was a direct descendant of Margarita de Castro e Souza, a black branch of the Portuguese royal house. Several de Souzas traveled to the Netherlands when their cousin, the Princess Isabella, went there to marry the Grand Duke, Philip the Good of Burgundy, in 1429. Charlotte was a patron of the arts and an amateur botanist who helped expand Kew Gardens. She was distressed by her husband's bouts of physical and mental illness, which became permanent in later life and resulted in their eldest son George's appointment as Prince Regent in 1811. George III and Charlotte had 15 children in total, 13 of whom survived to adulthood. They included two future British monarchs, George IV and William IV. The suggestion that Queen Charlotte was black implies that her granddaughter, Queen Victoria, and her great-great-great-great-granddaughter, Queen Elizabeth II, had African forebears.
You're invited to celebrate Black History Month with TNCRadio.live. We're shining a long overdue spotlight on the hidden figures of untaught history who deserve to be celebrated for their contributions to civil rights, politics, the arts, and beyond.
Yes, Virginia, there really was a Bridgerton. The Netflix series about a biracial queen has a royal underlying backstory. Sophia Charlotte, born May 19, 1744, and lived to be 74, was the queen consort of the British King George III from their marriage on September 8th in 1760.
And wisdom, the fastest growing community radio station in Kansas City, Missouri. We're also an internet radio station as well, too. You can check out this broadcast numerous ways. You can hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and I know I'm missing one. TuneIn Radio. Type in KUAW and we'll pop right up. If you look at the social media outlets, you'll be able to actually see this show as well, too. Also, on all those platforms, you are able to comment, with the exception of TuneIn Radio, and give your comments, questions, or concerns during this live broadcast. Also, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please hit us up at 816-599-6893. So, I'm glad to be back here at KUAW with you all today because I have a broadcast for you. And this broadcast was inspired by my students. We have several conversations in regards to relationships between their educators and themselves, connections that they may have. But one particular topic that popped up was in the classroom. And I made the comment that when parents drop their kids off to school, it's the teacher's job to then pick up that torch and take on the role of parental guidance during that time period. And a few of my students were kind of confused with that because they don't, I mean, in my classroom, they feel that actual relationship there. However, they don't feel that same relationship with every other teacher. And then I, in turn, made the comment that, well, to be honest, not every teacher loves you like you think that they do. And they really just some kids got what I was saying, but then I had a few that still didn't get it. So we continued to think about it more, and I said, well, look, just because someone's teaching you in the classroom doesn't mean that they care about you, because there are individuals who become teachers for the wrong reasons, i.e. the paid holidays, the summers off, the 2 weeks for Christmas time, the weekends off, just in general. And also you have some people who become teachers for other reasons too. It's like, for example, you have some individuals who become police officers because they want to exert some kind of authority. You have some people that are like that to be with teachers as well too. So right there, the eyes started opening, and the kids started reflecting on educators that they had in the past. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say educators. People who were posing as educators in the past who they encountered. So another topic came up too in regards to people's ideologies and the way that they think. So we talked about some of the lessons and some of the curriculum that we read in school, and the topic of racism came up. And one of my students asked, can teachers be racist? I said, of course. In fact, education is probably one of the hubs for racism. And we talked about institutionalized racism as well, too. So I then went on to lead the conversation to say that when it comes to teachers, you have people who like to exert racist thinking into their lessons. So they're actually teaching you some concepts that are racist that you buy into, and you're already making yourself a willing pawn to a racist agenda. And that's what institutionalized racism is. So I kind of sat and thought about that. I talked to a couple of my colleagues, both those who I work with and those who I've worked with in the past. And, this whole thing with racist teachers in the classroom is a huge issue that we just don't touch. Because I've actually seen a lot of things occur, and I'm not one of those ones that stay quiet. I was in a classroom one time, and I had a student come to me and say that a teacher made a racist comment to him. And that particular racist comment was very heartbreaking. The student, let me ask, I can repeat the comment, but not say any names, right? Of course, okay. So the student came to me and said, I'm going to say my name, Mr. Gethers. I was in class, and incident occurred. And I said, what was it? Other students chimed in, too. They said that the young man he's dark-skinned. And he said he was in class, and the kids were teasing him about his complexion. So then the teacher chimed in and said, she turns off the lights and calls him by name and says, I can't find him, I can't find him, I can't find him. And then, of course, all the kids laughed. But then, like, some of the students said, yeah, we laughed because at the moment it was funny, but then we sat and thought about it. It's like, whoa, this isn't right. And then, of course, the young man started crying, and he was very upset about that. So immediately, I took him to an administrator, had him tell his side of the story. And then, of course, it went with that teacher. Now, surprisingly, that teacher is still employed. And I don't understand the logic to that. Matter of fact, well, I'm not going to get into any of the deeper personnel issues, but it just really floored me that there was no full-out consequence, because it's an extreme issue. I mean, now we have, and when stuff like that goes unchecked, we now see situations where we have teachers saying even more extremely racist things, like actually saying certain names and words that they shouldn't say to kids and in front of kids. So with saying that, I want to give this checklist to individuals who are in the classroom and they want to do a check. This is becoming an anti-racist educator check. You all got to do your self-check. Now, when I say anti-racist, I'm not saying you're racist. I'm saying some of the things you might say or do may come off as racist. One of my colleagues made a comment and said that a lot of people use willful ignorance in regards to dealing with racial issues. So first off, let's go ahead and just jump right into it. Anti-racism is the active process of identifying and eliminating racism by changing systems, organizational structures, policies and practices, and attitudes so that power is redistributed and shared equitably. I like that last word, equitable. Being equitable is what you want. You don't want fairness. You don't want the same. You want equitable. That's what you want. So, and this definition came from the National Action Committee of the Status of Women International Perspectives and Women in Global Solidarity. Shout out to Women's History Month and Irish American History Month too. So, and this definition really, when it says, when I read the definition, it reminded me of a school system. Because in the school system, you have, the school system itself is a system. You have organizational structure, you have policies, you have practices, you have attitudes, and you have power. You have all that. So, with saying that, this definition, in my opinion, really, really focuses on the whole school concept. Because schools are some of the most racist entities out there. And if you don't believe me, I want you to look at your school setting. I want you to look at all your classified employees. And when I say classified, those are people who aren't teaching, like your bus drivers, your cooks, your interventionists, your cafeteria workers, your paras. Those individuals are your classified. Certified is your principals, counselors, superintendents, teachers. More than likely, depending on where you go, the majority of your classified staff is typically white or white female. And your, certified. Yeah, particularly white female majority. Classified, predominantly black. And that's a problem. Because especially if you have a classroom or a school building and the majority of your kids are either multicultural or black or African descent, and the majority of your staff is white, that's a huge problem. I had to, go ahead and quote Brother Cornell with the block and say, he always says representation matters. And representation does matter. And if that's not being represented in your school system, how are those kids going to function? They need to be able to see themselves in their curriculum. So we're saying that becoming an anti-racist is always a work in progress. No one's saying that you're going to be an anti-racist at the snap of a finger. There's no infinity gauntlet out there that will allow you to snap and make yourself an anti-racist. It's a work in progress. And with that being a work in progress, it seldom yields perfection and differs depending on who you are. Now, who you are determines how fast the process goes. And I think the thing that you need to throw in there is you must be, what's the word I'm looking for? A listener and open for that feedback and constructive criticism. If you're not open to that, you're not going to be able to receive anything professionally as far as growth. Now, people think that when you become an anti-racist, it means taking responsibility for your power and privilege, acknowledging the feelings that you have as far as to increase your multiculturalism or to cultivate a desire of understanding and growth. That's exactly what it is. Now, true love is sacrificing your privilege. Because, see, I hear a lot of teachers say, I love my students. Well, do you love your students enough to sacrifice your privilege for them? And if you want an example of what it looks like to sacrifice your privilege, in the Bible, Jesus Christ died on the cross for all of our sins. Now, I'm not preaching to you, but I'm giving you an example of what sacrificing your privilege is. Jesus Christ could have walked up off that cross. He could have had the angels come and wipe out all the individuals. But what did he do? He hung his, he gave his life for us. That's sacrificing your privilege for the underserved. So, teachers, I'm not saying you got to kill, allow yourself to die for your students. I'm not saying that. I just gave you a perfect example of what it is. What I'm saying is, whatever privilege that you feel that you have, based on being white, based on being white male, based on being white female, based on whatever you feel that you are you willing to sacrifice that for the betterment of your students? Or for the betterment of your staff who do not share your privilege? So, that's the question. First thing, are you willing to sacrifice your privilege? And if you are, then we can go ahead and continue further on this conversation. Now, we also need to recognize that there are important class differences between people of color. Now, I say that because there's an article that I was reading, and yes, people of color, you can discriminate against people of color as well too. Some of the worst discrimination that I ever endured in the classroom and in the school building came from people who claimed that they looked like me and where they came from. Mr. Walker's old school, so I'm going to go ahead and throw out an old school comment. All skin folk ain't kinfolk. And I learned that the hard way working in the school system. I was in a situation where a black administrator told me, I'm going to groom you for administration. And then she immediately turned her back on me and favored me for someone who was underqualified of a fair complexion. And that just floored me and pretty much sabotaged my whole career for years. And, and a good friend of mine gave me an article and said, I want you to read this article. And I read it and it said, black teachers leave because of black administrators. Now, am I saying that all administrators that are black are racist towards their own, or discriminatory towards their own? No, but I'm saying you see that a lot because sometimes when we get promoted and we get a seat at the table, we tend to forget where we came from. And no, I'm not saying give me the homeboy hookup. No, I'm just saying don't forget where you came from, because last time I checked, you can be reminded who you are real quick by those who you sit at the table with and you think are dining with you. See, sometimes when we get a promotion, we think that we are dining with the quote-unquote majority race, but really, you're just the entertainment. That's all you are. And then when you do that, all you're doing is you're pushing an agenda further to keep those who look like you held back. Now, all racial groups are struggling in some way under white supremacy. I don't care who you are, what your political agenda is, what your religious background is. There is white supremacy in this country. It is what it is. And no, that's not rocking no boat. Well, I take that back. It is rocking a boat. And hopefully, all those naysayers fall off, because white supremacy is a real thing. We must realize that people of color are not always united in solidarity. We're not. And I've noticed that people of color are not united in solidarity as much as they should be in the educational system. For some strange reason, we feel like we gotta fight each other. We feel like we gotta talk bad about each other, hold each other back. You know, I mean, it's bad enough that white supremacy is holding us back, but we shouldn't be holding each other back. And I hope that administrator that held me back all those years is actually watching this show. And while we're fighting against each other, we're not challenging the internalized white supremacy and the racist agenda. We're not. We're instead feeding it and making it cultivate. Now, becoming an anti-racist means having an anti-racist agenda. Now, we know that there is a racist agenda, and that racist agenda is to push forth white supremacy. Now, when I say white supremacy, I'm not saying all white people. No, there are a lot of white people in my career that I've worked with that have been strong allies of me being a teacher and students of color being in the classroom. I work with several of them, and I've shouted them out several times on the air. And they actually sit there and they tell students, yes, there's a racist agenda going on, and we're going to get through it. So we're saying that you got to have an anti-racist agenda. An anti-racist agenda offers understanding of an explanation of race, racism, and particular racial formations that develop in and around the classroom or program in question. So we're saying that it defines and explains the particular realms of experiences that both individuals and groups find themselves involved in involved in regards to that school building or that particular classroom. So first of all, as my dad would say, peep it, and then, do what you gotta do to get rid of it. But see, that's the thing though. You have people that will acknowledge the racist behavior, but those same people won't have the courage to push forth and stop it. Claim a good example of this. There are white teachers who allow black students to say the N-word to each other. Why? Now, a student referred to me as that one time. And the student was new to the country. And I wrote the kid up and gave the young man to the vice principal. She came to me and said, well, I don't know what to do with the situation. She said, because black people use that word all the time with each other. I said, excuse me? I said, I'm not just any black person that you think you know of. I'm a professional, and this kid used a racial slur towards a staff personnel, and you're gonna do nothing about it because of what you think. That's a stereotype. And with that, I ended up talking to the student, and he told me, he said, sir, I actually, I thought that word meant black male, because he was like legit straight new to the country, and he saw people of color using that word all the time. And black people, we gotta stop using that word, for real. Like I was telling a student today, when you crack the door and allow certain things to come in, things that shouldn't come in will blow the door wide open and just run all up in your room. So what am I saying about that? If you allow certain people to call you that name, don't be surprised if that door opens up wider and folk who you don't want to call you that name calls you that name. But I have another show working up now, why black people shouldn't use the N-word. That's coming up soon, so I don't want to spoil that. But we're saying that in your anti-racist agenda, you got to discuss how racism tends to be a part of the structures and the mechanisms of the grading of writing in the classroom. Teacher feedback and the ways the schools admit and place students in the classrooms. Now I'm going to stop right here, because all this right here is a show by itself. Now, first off, it says mechanisms in grading in the classroom. I remember I was, when was this? Shucks, I was in high school. And this whole Ebonics thing came out. And I said, what is Ebonics? And man, you know what? I love my dad to life, because he is so up on game. And I talked to him about it, and he said, son, that's some, I'm not gonna go repeat verbatim what he said, because I don't want to get shut off. But he said that's some mess. He said, how you gonna sit up here and say it's Ebonics, but white people talk like that too? And I looked at him. He said, son, think about it. When they brought those Africans off the ships, who did they hear talking like that? Who did they develop their language from? If you go down to southern towns, who talk like that too? There's no difference. But they're trying to say that this is how you speak. Son, I don't speak like that. You don't speak like that. So why are they saying that's how you speak? They are teaching people how you speak. And he said, how you allegedly speak. That's to pigeonhole you. So you're going to teach me how you think I should speak, but you're not going to teach me the professional way to speak? So think about that. You got kids in school right now learning Ebonics, okay, quote unquote, or the Black English vernacular. And the fact that they're learning that, you're not teaching them what's presentable in jobs. They're not speaking that type of language or that verbiage in Fortune 500 companies, in educational systems, in the medical field. They're not. In the police department, they're not. So you're setting our kids up to fail. I had this man sit up here and tell me, and by the way, he's an educator as well too. He said, oh, you can't have both, Black History Month or Ebonics. I said, hold up, man. I had to catch myself. How can you sit up here and tell me one thing is designed to educate people in regards to my culture, and the other is designed to tear down the education that the previous is set up to do? So you want me to set up, so you're choosing me to pick between salvation and damnation? Cultural salvation and damnation? No, you crazy. And he said, oh, yeah, you're right. I said, no, man, you just revealed your true self to me. So then I sat there, and I was in a college class. Same thing popped up. I said, excuse me, professor. Okay, we got a Black English vernacular that you're teaching us. Is there a white English vernacular? Is there a Chinese English vernacular? Is there a Spanish English vernacular? Is there a French English vernacular? She said, no. I said, so why are you just so why is there a Black English vernacular and not everything else like that? And if there is, I'm sorry, and if there isn't, why is this designed? She said, well, I want you all to understand how Black people talk. I said, ma'am, I've been a Black man all my life. And I don't talk like that. I said, what you're teaching us is what they have on minstrel shows. What you're doing right now is a reflection of what went on in minstrel shows when white folks portrayed us and tried to give us their culture. Give us their sidebar version of our culture. That's what you're doing in the classroom with these kids. You're telling kids who you think they are and making them accept that. So, and I told my students that too. Also, we already got the writing piece. So they're grading you on how they think you should talk. Not how you're supposed to talk, or not how you actually talk, or not how you should talk to be productive and successful. They want you to talk in regards to be a stereotype, to be a slave, to be the opposite of. And if you don't believe me, I work in the school system where they said, we don't teach grammar. I said, whoa, hold on, you don't teach grammar? They said, no, we don't teach that. Why not? They said, well, we don't want to focus on that. So you mean to tell me that you have kids who don't know grammatical aptitude and you're still promoting them on to other grades? That's ridiculous. And in that school district, predominantly kids of color. But their counterparts who are of a different shade and complexion and a different zip code, they're getting the skills they need to be successful. See, in the urban core, or where there are students who are of multicultural descent, they're taught to the test. But predominantly white schools are taught to be successful. See, when it comes to people of color, you teach us, but you educate white kids. When it comes to people of color, you tell us, we got to get a job. But you teach white kids to get careers. You know what JOB stands for? JOB is a backronym for just over broke. So you're teaching us to still struggle and be subservient, whereas our white counterparts are being taught to be the ones who run the businesses. That's not equitable. It's not. Also, it says here, teacher feedback. Now, when you get feedback, your feedback needs to be productive to where the student can build upon their craft, not tearing down. I've heard comments made to students in regards to who they are. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, you're going to sit up here and grade a kid based on their culture. Now, for example, there are some things that you see on standardized tests that you can tell that they're gearing the test towards a particular culture. You know that for a fact. So you're grading a kid. Are you giving a kid a feedback on something they don't know? They never experienced before? How's that equitable? It's not. That's like telling a fish, hey, I'm gonna grade you on how to climb a tree. And based on how you're shaped and how you have your gills and everything, if you can't climb that tree right, I'm gonna give you feedback on why you can't climb that tree right. Well, I can't climb a tree. I have fins and gills. I'm in a bowl. But you still get negative feedback based on who you are. The job that they have you doing is not equitable. I say it all the time. You giving someone with Spider-Man powers a Superman job. How can they succeed in that? And then because the world blows up, oh, man, you messed up. No. Also, the way the school admits and places kids in the classes. Come on now. I want you to look at your SPED program and look at your gifted program. In your gifted program, for the most part, I'm not speaking about every school, but for the most part, white kids are in the gifted program, predominantly white female. In your SPED classes, predominantly black males. Think about how they admit them. I've seen just because the girl's quiet and she can read, put her in a rich class. What? Now, I've had situations where there are kids who had higher reading scores than the kids in the rich classes, but they did not admit that kid. And for the most part, I'm not saying it's because the kid's black. However, every time I try to get a kid admitted, it's because they're black. I'm sorry, every time I try to get the kid admitted and they were denied because some strange loophole, they were black kids. I've had black kids who scored proficient on the MAP test, advanced on the MAP test, reading high school levels, can write on a high school level, and they weren't admitted. However, when you look in the enriched class, oh wow, that kid shouldn't even be there. But yet and still, I mean, you don't want that happening. And also, think about this too. Your teachers of the enriched class, what do they look like? Now, I'll admit, I taught the enriched class once. And when I did, we was rolling. But you know what? I'm going to tell you the same exact thing I tell my students. They hate seeing me teaching, period. I'm a black male English teacher. They hate that. I'm a black male English teacher who's published. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. I'm not bragging, but I'm saying I have strong credentials to teach English and reading. But for some strange reason, they make it hard. I mean, it's made hard. Everywhere I go, it's hard. And that's how, and that's what it is. But back to the whole classroom situation, though. In the classroom, we do our kids a disservice because based on who they look, what they look like, who they are, we like to make the decision for them on where they need to go. And when you have a kid, look at that. What are they gonna say? All black kids are sped and all white kids are gifted? Sounds to me like white supremacy. It does. That's what it looks like. If you only have a sprinkle of color in an enriched class, you can't sit up here and tell me that if you have a predominantly black school building, your enriched class is predominantly white. That don't make sense. It does not. I think Percy Miller, you all know him as Master P. He said, if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. It don't. It does not. It does not. That's like a cat winning the Westminster Dog Show. Doesn't make sense. Also, it says what it values in writing and how those values are related to a larger dominant situation. Now, what are kids reading and what are kids writing? Are they reading a curriculum that puts them in a positive light or a negative light? You got kids right now that is reading and writing essays and material and reading material that's a damnation of their culture. I have kids right now, before they came in our school building, one thing I will say is that our history department in our school building and a good chunk of our English teachers tell kids, your history did not start with slavery. You have a lot of kids who think that they're here because of slavery. No. There are a lot of people of African descent who do not descend from slaves. Now, I'm not saying that slavery is, something that you should try to hide. No, it happened. You triumphed from that. But you're not going to sit up here and have these kids thinking that their history started with slavery. All slavery did was interrupt our culture. That's all it did. It didn't do anything else. It interrupted our culture. It's not the defining moment of your culture. Because last time I checked, there are religious texts and historical texts and monuments that show we've been here way before any form of Americanized enslavement. Okay, when it comes to race and racism, the anti-racist work, it is important that everyone feels safe, but equally important that many also feel uncomfortable. So what that means is you got to feel uncomfortable. You got to be safe to feel uncomfortable. Because you cannot grow unless you step out of your comfort zone, get uncomfortable, and enlarge your territory. But at the same time, make it safe for people to be uncomfortable to learn. It's only through discomfort, and sometimes pain, and sometimes suffering, that we grow and develop and change for the better. There's no progress without pain. You will have to have those difficult conversations. Not that critical race theory stuff to say, you know what, I'm not going to say certain things to make certain people feel bad. No, you got to get uncomfortable to get comfortable. I told people I work with, y'all got a problem with black men teaching. Y'all got a problem with black authority in this building. You do. Tell it. Because it won't get fixed if it's not being told. All right, practices that help us to become anti-racist. Now, we got to begin with a personal reflection. You got to sit back and think, what am I doing that may come off as racist? What am I doing that comes off as discriminatory? Because we all say and do things. Because I've seen teachers beat the mess verbally out of students of color. But when it comes to white students, they handle them with kid gloves. And they do the exact same thing, if not worse, than the kid of color. See, we got to assess our position. When you assess your position, this begins with the understanding of the forms of racism. And also know how those forms take manifestation. You got to understand white privilege. And for those willing to do a deep dive, engaging with the critical race theory, that means going against it. Sacrifice your privilege. Talk about what happened. You got to have that conversation. Because racism comes in different shape, forms, and colors. And you know what? Sometimes racism can be what you're looking at on the other side of the mirror. But you're afraid to change it because of your privilege. Also, you got to understand the impact of white supremacy in your job. The culture of higher education is not exempt from racism. Like I said earlier, institutionalized racism. How many black superintendents do you see? How many black female superintendents do you see? Shout out to Raytown Quality Schools. They have a black female superintendent. Hey, I'm excited about that one. Let's see. It's important to understand that racism in its context is expressed in individual lives as well as particular institutionalized challenges. So, for example, me walking down the street, I can experience racism. Me being in school or in an educational system, I can experience institutionalized racism. It's not just on me. It's in a system. And that system is designed to hold people of color back. You can't tell me it's not. I would like someone to call 816-599-6893 and explain to me and tell me that there's no such thing as institutionalized racism in the school system. And I'm going to ask you, think about your child's school. What color are most of the classified staff? What color is the principals, the vice principals, superintendents, and school board members? Now, don't say, oh, it's a, no. If the majority is not multicultural, I don't want to hear it. Especially if you're in a school building with predominant color. So there is institutionalized racism. Show me a school district where you have a black superintendent, a black board president, black principals, and predominantly black teachers. Now, I'm not saying they don't exist. I just want someone to say, hey, look, show me that and compare it to the number of institutions that are the opposite. It is what it is. That's how we are. That's how we cut. As my Uncle Timmy would say, that's how we cut. That's how it's cut. Learn about race. Learn about how racism shapes lives. Even if you already understand that your life experiences cannot be assumed as universal, learning about how racism shapes all our lives allows for more informed anti-racist work. That's that whole being an ally thing. Like, I may not know what it's like to be a woman, all right? But I do understand that women go through a lot of stuff. I may not know what a woman goes through, but I do know that I need to listen and assist. That's how you need to be when you are, if you have an anti-racist agenda. You don't know what it's like to be black, white teachers. You don't know what it's like to be discriminated against for being a black man, white teachers. You don't. But you have students that do. Understand that, embrace that, and assist those students. Also, I got another one too. And I got a problem with this one. You know, Mr. Walker, we got people who are white who say Black Lives Matter and all that, and they teach black students, but they hate their black parents. You can't love black lives and love teaching black students, but you hate their black parents. That don't make sense. Where do you think those black students came from? Black parents. And in order for those black students to have productive black lives that matter, you got to work with those black parents. You have to. You have to. So what I'm saying is, if you have a black student that's having an issue, it's okay. Pick up the phone and call that black parent. Don't be afraid. Don't. And that's deep right there. You got to really reflect on that. Really reflect on that. Acknowledge racial trauma. Ooh. Racial trauma. Some stuff happened to me, and I had a couple colleagues that were white. They were like, look, we with you, man. That's wrong. We got you. The sad part about it is, this is a long time ago. They stood more behind me than the individual that I thought was kinfolk who was kinfolk. I let that marinate. All white people ain't bad, and all black people don't have your best interests at heart. That's a reality that we gotta accept. So, communities of color have seen multiple police killings of African American boys and men and girls and women, either directly or vicariously through media accounts. They have been impacted directly or vicariously through media accounts by the criminalization of immigration and increases in deportations and detention. So, we're saying that we see ourselves destroyed on television daily. But yet and still, they try to make an excuse for why we're being exterminated. That's traumatic. And I'm sitting up here watching people who look like me, my son, my mom, my dad, my aunts, my uncles, my students, murdered daily. And you don't, but you have an issue with me having an issue with that. That's the problem. I had a teacher tell a kid, police brutality don't exist. This kid said, "Are you serious?" He walked about that classroom. See, racist, white supremacy. You're gonna sit up here and tell this kid that police brutality don't exist, and George Floyd just got killed by a police officer while 3 other cops watched? Just because it don't happen to you doesn't mean it does not exist. It's that simple. We got to get out of that. That's that supremacy of privilege. Well, it never happened to me, so it don't exist. Well, that's something that comes out of the back end of a bull in regards to thinking. Okay. This also begins with the understanding of the forms that racism takes. We said again, understanding white privilege, and again, engaging with that critical race theory. Now, understanding white privilege and how it impacts communities of color is crucial as an early step in your path to anti-racism. You have privilege based on what you look like. I don't care if you're poor or rich, just because, hey, you have privilege just for being white. You do. And if you don't believe me, I want you to ride down the street with 3 of your black friends and probably 1 of your Mexican friends and get pulled over and look at what happens. Make sense? Now, on the other side of that, I want you to look at all of my white brothers and sisters who actually marched with SNCC and King and who supported the Panthers and Malcolm X. Look what happened to them. They sacrificed their privilege, and they got the same, if not worse, than the individuals they were trying to ally themselves with. Get rid of that privilege. You cannot sit up here and actually help individuals with your privilege. Because when your privilege becomes threatened, you're going to make a choice. Hopefully you make the right choice. Also, how does your own identity shape with your teaching and relationship with students? See, we talked about bias one time, and some people say, I don't have bias. I don't have bias. Yeah, you do. Everybody got bias. Watch. Mr. Walker, what's your favorite color?
Blue.
He said blue. Mr. Walker, what's your favorite ice cream?
Vanilla, no. Butter pecan.
Butter pecan. Yeah, okay. Prince or Michael Jackson?
Prince.
See, those are all bias. Nothing wrong with that. Bias is your preference towards something. So for someone to say I don't have bias, you got bias. And don't sit up here and say you got racial bias, because guess what? I know a lot of white teachers who came to those to predominantly black schools and said, I'm here to make a difference. I'm here to save the world. But as soon as they got in that classroom and saw those struggles, they immediately left and went to whiter pastures. I've seen several teachers that I work with leave to go to your Blue Springs, your Raymores, and Raymore, Peculiar, y'all got some problems. And Beltons, okay? Grain Valleys. Now, I'm not knocking those schools, but don't sit up here and talk all that stuff. But then when you have an issue, you automatically leave and go to schools where there are not that many black students because you feel the black students were the problems. You see that a lot. So when I say that, think about your biases. We all have biases. We do. One teacher said, I'll admit it, I'm more biased towards women than I am to men. Now, she peeped that, and she said, you know what? I need to fix that. Because when I deal with male students, I shouldn't come at them as if I'm preferring a female student over them. Now, acknowledging the problem and saying you're trying to fix it, that's a step. That's a huge step. Think about your position as an ally. Now, you being an ally, is it difficult? I hope it is. It will be difficult being an ally. It'll also be a difficult choice. But at the same time, it should be a difficult choice. I'm sorry. It should be an easy choice, but with a difficult consequence. Yeah, I should say that. Because, about that situation when one particular school was playing against another particular school. Can I name that school? The one that's being racist? I can do that, can't I?
Schools, yeah, probably not bad.
Okay. Well, it was a Raymore school. And they used certain racial epithets towards a white male coach. They called him a blank lover, as well as his players. Now, that man was an ally. He told his students, I'm getting y'all out of here because it's not safe. Let's go. Got those boys on that bus and drove off. And if you don't believe me, I spoke to other teachers. Oh, yeah, I know exactly about that. But yeah, still, we still play against this particular school system. I can't grasp my mind around that. I tell my students, look, y'all, we going to Raymore. Hey, they don't like us. I mean, and I will have this conversation with any individual who works in the Raymore Peculiar School District, because I have a lot of occurrences that took place in regards to how their students, their parents, and their staffs were racially inappropriate to our students. And when I say our students, I mean students of color, students who are allies of students of color. I mean, it's to the point to where I don't like going out there. It's ridiculous. I mean, you sitting up here and you being called that name? That's why I said Raymore got some stuff to work on. And, I had a partner of mine, his cousin, put an Obama sign in the yard. His neighbor had the audacity to walk in his yard and take his Obama sign out of his yard. Come on now. Now, of course, you're going to say that happens everywhere. Yeah, it does, but we're talking about Raymore. See, we got to stop with all this, I'm going to move far out. Because, we need to stop, saying that whiter schools are better for our black students. Whiter communities are better for our black families. I'm not saying that you can't find success there, but we got to stop equating success with whiteness and failure with blackness. We got to stop that, because that's an issue. Now, if we build up our black communities and our black schools, then yes, that's success. We need to stop leaving the ship. Stop leaving that sinking ship. Sometimes if you plug up those holes and get rid of certain cargo, that ship is still afloat. It still sail. Think about that. I haven't even gotten through I haven't even put a dent in my notes yet. Let's see. Now, also, this goes to black teachers and black students too. Sometimes if you're the only one, ooh, man, that's pressure. This white teacher came to me and she was saying, yeah, I had this black student in my classroom and he was acting out. And I told him, you got to understand the rules of the white man in the school building in order to be successful. And if you don't believe me, y'all, please, please, please. This is legit. This woman said this. I can tell you the school district she works in, Belton, and tell you exactly what she said verbatim. And when she said, I said, why would you tell that student? And she said, no, he got to get together and learn and know how we do things. Whoa, are you serious? You have teachers that think that when you're the only whatever of who you are. Talk to people who are the only male, only female, only black, only Hispanic, only Asian, only LGBTQ+, only rich person, only poor person, only married person, only divorced person, only person with kids. You're coming into a situation where you're the abnormal. And they don't know how to deal with the abnormal. Therefore, their policies will be discriminatory towards you. They will be. I remember walking up into a school system, and I'm glad Mr. Walker's sitting down, because Mr. Walker lived through the civil rights movement. Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking about how old he is. That's eldership right there. And me being a teacher, I like to teach what my elders went through. The majority of how I teach is based upon my elders. So when I went into a school building, I said, hey, what do we do for Black History? They said, oh, we don't do that here. I said, we don't do that here. They said, yeah, we don't do that here. I said, okay, well, that's fine. But I celebrated. And what did I do? I did a Black History piece for the whole month of Black History Month. And I had a lot of students, white, black, and all other shades, loving it. So I was the only one that rocked it. I didn't care. I got all kind of side eyes and side looks. So my thing was, you don't celebrate Black History Month, but it's okay for a teacher to have a Confederate flag in his classroom. And I'm going to tell you the year this was. It wasn't 1960s. It was 2016. Very recent, 2016. And I'm like, man, yeah, I'm like, why you got this Confederate flag in your classroom? Oh, man, I teach Civil War. Not all year. Now I can see you putting it up for a prop. But you got that thing hanging up all year round? Y'all lost. It's over. You lost in 1865. So that flag should have no prevalence or no prominence waving anywhere, especially in the classroom. But it was okay for him to have that in the classroom, but it was an issue for me to teach black history. See? That's a racist agenda that needs to stop. So all of my people who want to have an anti-racist agenda, you need to stand up and rise up. Tear down everything that's racist. Also, in closing, we need to assess our expectation of the ideal student. Remember when I said that when you look in classrooms that are enriched, you have predominantly white female students? What does the ideal student look like to you? Now me, the ideal student is an individual who cares more about their education than I do and will do anything they can to progress their education and learns outside of the four walls of the classroom and uses that information to establish the truth based on fact. But you have people who think that they put a complexion to it. And that's an issue. Racism is embedded when we make assumptions about what students should look like, what they should know before your class begins, and what compartment they should enact in their meeting with you, and notions about their capacities of self-discipline, all based on your stereotypical vantage point. Now, in closing, we all have the ability to learn. As long as you have breath in your body, you have the ability to learn. And if you have the ability to learn, you have the ability to teach also. There is no rule book or no mandation that all teachers need to look a certain way and all students need to be taught based on how they look, where they're from, who or what they believe in, and who they choose to love. There are agendas out there that are designed to teach people to accept discrimination and racism from an oppressive standpoint. Teachers, you have a position in a child's life that can shape the way that they think to empower them. But at the same time, you have the power also to take away their trajectory. You need to be that fuel to propel any student based on who they are or where they come from out of this atmosphere and beyond to claim and conquer new worlds. Are you willing to be that fuel? Are you willing to allow students to propel farther than you ever reached, no matter who they are and no matter what they look like? If the answer is yes to that question, please continue to establish an anti-racist agenda in your classroom. And if the answer is no, teachers like me and the ones who roll with an anti-racist agenda are coming for you. I'm Tyrone Gethers Jr. This is the Source of the Inkwell. And let education overflow like ink and stain permanently. I'll see you next week. God bless.
We're shining a long overdue spotlight